Every adversity, every failure, every heartache carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. That was a quote by Napoleon Hill. Welcome, everybody, to this edition of Finding Your Feet After Failure. And today's guest is talking about failure as the staircase to success. And I just have to tell you that this guest that we have today is somebody that I admire and respect. She has so much value, so many insights, and she's so well worth listening to. So I would very much like to welcome Celeste Louw. Hi, Celeste.
Hi, Lois. It's good to be here, and I admire you just as much. So it's great. I love talking to you.
Well, we've done a number of talks in the past, and you always have so much value to give to other people. And I just hope everybody watches and listens to the end, because I'm sure everybody's going to learn from this discussion. So I've got quite a long bio for Celeste, but I will keep it short and let her just talk about what she does. But Celeste is a dedicated wife, mother, grandmother, as well as a healing guide, trainer, activist, biker, and author of My Journey, My Way, Rising from the Ashes of Abuse, and the ABC of Healing. So that tells you she's had quite a life. And in various settings, from boardrooms and classrooms to police stations and courtrooms, Celeste offers a unique perspective on addressing the complex issues of gender-based violence, abuse, and trauma. And she's a founder and director of Optimystic Bikers Against Abuse. And this non-profit organization embodies the principles of the biker code in all of her endeavors. And I'm not going to say any more about Optimistic Bikers and the spirit of the optimist, because I think Celeste can share a lot more insight and detail about that can benefit everybody. So just tell us a little bit about Optimistic Bikers, Celeste.
Yeah, so we're a group of bikers. We've got a core group of bikers, and then we have volunteers and experts in their fields. And the whole principle of it is educate, empower, and educate, empower, and enlighten, like lift people. So we have an organization of bikers who ride and represent and live the code. We're all survivors of something, like all of you. We're all survivors of something. And we live a healing lifestyle, which encompasses a lot of the biker code. And our whole point is, if there's somebody struggling, we're here to help you. So it doesn't mean we're going to do it for you. It means we're going to empower you, educate you, and uplift you to the point where you can actually help yourself. Right? Because at the end of the day, we all need to help ourselves. So that's what we do as an organization. We try very hard to keep our doors open so that any survivor who reaches out to us from anywhere in the world who wants to heal, we will help them along that journey by guiding, right? I think that's the main thing. And if we don't know the answers, we go find them. So that's the core of what we do as an organization, trying to create connected humanity. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I've got a sore throat, so I'm busy sucking sore throat tablets. So in your hometown, where is it?
Kimberley.
Kimberley. In your hometown of Kimberley, I believe that if people want support, if they're afraid or they need encouragement, all the big bikers go along and help intimidate the abuser by just their sheer presence.
No, actually not, right? because that doesn't work. Intimidating someone who is it doesn't work. Intimidation isn't the answer, and oppression isn't the answer. So what we do is we support. I suppose we look intimidating sometimes when we go out in person. A lot of the time people don't even know that we are helping people. So we don't believe that violence is the answer to violence, or threats are the answer to threats. So we basically go out and support people in a way that is less intimidating. So we work with inside the law. We teach people how to negotiate the law and how to get protection and that kind of thing, but we're not in the business of intimidating people. And I think that's an interesting point, because a lot of people think of bikers as being intimidating. And here's the thing: if we're going to create change, we can't just create change in victims or survivors, because I don't like victim, right? Victim is a horrible thing. I believe if you are still breathing afterwards, then you're a survivor already. So survivors, we need to help survivors. But where abusers are open to change, we need to also help there. Because the fact of the matter is, we can't just be one-sided and only help survivors, right? Because oftentimes abusers are survivors of something else. The world is complicated. We want to make everything so simple, but it can be very complicated. And I do believe that people who really want to change, or who really can see the negativity in their behavior, they will. The problem is getting people to see their own bad behavior, right? So that is why success rates with abusers are lower, because they don't acknowledge the fact that they're doing something wrong. But once somebody has acknowledged that, there's a door to help people.
So do you actually work with abusers as well?
Sometimes, and I'm going to shock you and tell you, most of the people who are displaying abusive behavior that we help are actually women, because they have reached a point where they are bleeding over people who didn't break them. So I can't say that all our survivors are perfectly innocent people who've been victimized, because the problem with being victimized and then not getting the assistance that you need straight away is that there's a very hard chance that in other areas you will become what broke you. So part of healing survivors is not just healing people who are going, oh, my life is in crisis and I've been so badly hurt. And then there's the added, and now I'm hurting other people. And I think the difference is people who've got abusive tendencies, who are survivors, notice their abusive tendencies and come for help. Whereas people who are just generally abusers don't see that, right? So if you've never been a victim, you don't actually see that there's anything wrong with your behavior, I think. But it's complicated. I mean, what makes an abuser? You and I can talk for 7 hours and not agree. It's part and parcel of why we're having a problem solving the problem, is that we don't actually know what makes somebody become like that.
Yes, you're right. We can go down this rabbit hole and we can speak for hours on that. So let's move on to failure. Talk to me about failure. Something where
failure is the staircase to success.
Sorry?
Somewhere where I failed. Oh gosh, how long have we got? I think that as diverse as my life has been, I've had so many failures, and I think it's so easy to get stuck in those failures. I think in a lot of respects I failed as a friend, in a lot of respects I failed as a mother, in a lot of respects I failed as a wife, I failed as a leader of an organization, I failed in business, I failed everywhere, and in different aspects of my life. I've spiritually failed, and I hold myself to a very high standard, so it makes it really easy to fail, because when you hold yourself to a high standard, reaching that standard can be hard. But when I say failure is a staircase to success, I want to tell you it's one of those tricky staircases, like haunted house staircases, right? You have to understand that in order to learn and grow and become your best you, those failures failures are what teaches you that stuff. And I think that because I failed in all of those areas and recognize that I failed in all of those areas, then my next attempt is so much better than the previous one. And so I think, like, even if I look in motherhood, the reason I have such an awesome relationship with my children is because I'm able to tell them, oh, you know, at that time when I did that, I was really out of control, and I failed you, and this is how I failed you. And oftentimes they'll go, no, you didn't. And then I realize sometimes our perception of failure is also, you know, it sets us up. So I think failure is a thing that we set ourselves up for sometimes. But remember, every time you fail is an opportunity to succeed next time.
I love the fact that you've shared that you failed as a wife, as a mother. Most people will think of the big failures and not the everyday failures that most of us actually do all the time. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Failing as a mother. Can you give me an example how you failed as a mother?
Okay. Let me think of a bigger one. So because I came out of a lot of abuse, right? And I kind of got an attitude of like, nobody's ever going to step on me. And the problem when your abuser is that often you will see shades of their father. For me, right? So for me, I have to say their father. Sometimes you can see shades of the father in the child. Like they'll get a look on their face or whatever. The look when it came from the father was, oh hell, now I'm going to get a beating. But when it's coming from the child, it actually doesn't have that meaning. It's different. And so I had an incident where I actually had pushed my son up against the wall, and I was shouting in his face, I will not let you treat me like your father treated me. And when I let him go, I walked away and I suddenly realized that I was becoming as bad as what his father had done. And so once I calmed down, I called him and I apologized. And I explained to him that just because he has similar expressions to his father doesn't mean that the intent is the same, that it was my issue, that it was my trigger, and that he had actually not done anything wrong. And we had a long conversation about it, and luckily we're able to resolve that. But I think it was one of the worst moments as a parent to catch myself in an abusive situation with my own child, when I was like so focused on saving them from being abused by their father.
And the fact that you had that conversation and you
It's hard to say that, right?
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's really very vulnerable sharing. But the fact that you had that conversation and that you dealt with it, how did that benefit your relationship going forward?
Oh, it's extremely. I think the thing is that we don't have enough courageous conversation with the immediate people in our lives, right? I think that courageous conversation is something that we should teach our children from young. And when we talk about failure, there's a lot I've got to say about how we are set up to see failure as negative from children. So for me, courageous conversation is really important, and I encourage my children to do that. And sometimes we have very big Mediterranean personalities. Sometimes you'll walk into our house and you'll think we're about to kill each other because we're screaming and shouting. But it's not about that. It's about the fact that you have the courage to say, no, I don't agree with you, and what you did was wrong. And what that situation created is that my children are not afraid to see me as a human being and not put me on a pedestal, and also that we can talk about everything. So those conversations that we've had over the years, which were actually me trying to correct my mistakes as a parent, have created a situation where my children and I can discuss a lot of things that I think most parents don't discuss with their children. And my children are not afraid to get loud and tell me that I'm wrong, and we can discuss it afterwards. And for me to get loud and tell them I'm wrong, and we can discuss it afterwards. And I think that is lacking in a lot of people's lives, unfortunately, because Courageous conversation is what we need to change the world.
So true, so true, and such a difficult thing to do. So you are saying that failure starts with parenting and childhood. Do you want to expand on that thought process?
So what I'm saying is that the way I was raised was, if you fail, it's like the end of the world, right? It's like if you get something wrong, you feel punished and almost like unvalidated, like you're useless because you failed something. And we taught that in school. We taught that from our parents, like we have this standard. And so we build it in ourselves, this idea that if we get something wrong, our whole lives are over. Instead of being taught, like, you can fail and you can correct, and then things will go better. So with my kids, that's what I've tried to do. And unfortunately, I started quite late, which is something I feel is a failure, but I did start. I started going, okay, so we failed at this. Right now, what do we do to correct that? And let's carry on. And it doesn't mean that your life is over. I still love you. You are still worthy. You were born worthy. This didn't work. Let's try something else. But I think that society doesn't see it like that. Failures are treated badly. And then what happens is internally, we treat failure badly. So we see it as a negative instead of seeing it as a learning curve. And we taught that. Right? We taught that failure is negative. If you fail a test, oh, you didn't work hard enough. Instead of going, okay, look, see this test? Now we know what you don't know. Let's correct that. We don't teach people that. We teach people, you're a bad child because you didn't listen and you didn't study, and and so that becomes how we see failure. I'm bad because I got it wrong.
It reminds me of my schooling. I was terrible at home economics. So I was terrible at cooking and sewing and all of those those things. And I did really badly. And nobody helped me. And today I don't do those things. So that failure carried on throughout my life.
Not only that, I know people who have incredible talent, Lois, artistic talent. They are, I mean, really, if people could see the stuff they draw, the stuff they make, it's incredible. But because somebody told them that it wasn't good enough, that it wasn't right, like for instance, mom thought landscapes are better than anime, right? Don't draw that, draw this. That talent is now taken from the world because they see that as a failure. And I think it's so sad that so many people are not following their purpose because somebody told them that they had failed at it. Instead of telling them, well, that's, this is good, but we can improve here. Or, yes, you didn't get that right. You missed the plot completely, but let's try again. And that we're not teaching people that. Let's try again. And I think that's the reason why we struggle when we are trying to do healing work with people. Like for example, you teach them how to square breathe, right? And it sounds easy and they can't get it right. They try it once and then they throw the whole process out the window because they couldn't get it right. And I'm going, no, it's not about that. It's about try, then let's try something else. So people are like, they're very quick to label something as useless instead of going, well, maybe I can do better at it.
Now, how do we change people's mindsets? How do we change the teachers and the parents of the world to get them to not bring down their children or their students?
I think that it's a long-term project, right? So I don't think there's a quick fix for most things. Don't have a quick fix. I think it's about one person at a time. It's about, luckily we have social media. So I can go on social media and go, failure is like you doing it. The more people that watch what you're saying, the more people that watch what I'm saying, the more people whose minds we can change, it'll become a ripple effect. But a lot of people are just going, oh, well, it's never going to change, so let's just not do anything. And that is a real problem for me. I'm like, I don't like that attitude of nothing's ever going to change, so I might as well not even try. I think that the more we try, the more we're talking about it, the more people that we can reach, one person at a time, the more things will change. And I think people are hungry for that change. I think that people want a better world to live in. I think that people are more focused on real than they've ever been. But I think that the fake is so much easier. Like, it's easier. Lois, come on. You tell me. It's so much easier to do a live feed with filters on so that you look like a Barbie doll than it is to actually look at your face and see your ployer. No.
I
It's
love
so much
Zoom.
easier.
I love
No?
Zoom. It takes the wrinkles out.
No, and you can't stop it. But I mean, the thing is, it's so much easier to play into the plastic than it is to be real. And I think that that's something that people aren't understanding, is that people are thinking it's hard to be fake, but actually it's not hard to be fake. We are taught how to be fake from childhood. I don't know about you, where you grew up in a house that, like, oh, what are people going to think? Reputation is everything. If you lose your reputation, you're stuffed, right? And I'm going, no, character is everything, especially in the world that we live in now, because now you can lose your reputation without even doing anything wrong. Somebody can dislike you and trash you all over social media, and you are going to have no choice about it. It's like, the gossip girls at school, they just got global, right? And they can do that to you. But if your character is good, it won't matter, because you'll just carry on being you, and eventually people will see what has happened to you, and people will see through that fake, right? But it's consistent being yourself. It's difficult because we're taught to fit in. We're taught not to challenge the norm, all of that kind of thing. So I think that one of the steps in understanding that failure is a staircase, right, is understanding that if you're real and if you keep real and you try to get rid of the masks and all of that, at the end of the day, you are going to have a better success story because of all those failures and because you are real.
But to be real on social media, to be truly real, is you have to admit to having those failures, to not being as successful as everybody thinks you are. You go onto Facebook and everybody's doing this and they're winning this and they're traveling here and they've succeeded there. And you think, wow, everybody's lives are so brilliant. Where am I going wrong?
If you really know, and if you know people, like if you really know people and you see their social media, then you know that. You know that they are covering and putting up this face. And it's sad for me, because I think that their real journeys are so much more interesting and successful and beautiful. Like faking it is just letting yourself down, actually, because what makes you valuable is that you are human, is that you make mistakes, is that you rise from those mistakes, right? But people are trying to make out like they are perfect. And I can tell you right now, that's one thing it's one thing I try really, really hard to do, because when I was afraid of success, right? So, yeah, afraid of success. It's a thing, right? When I was afraid of success, I had this thinking that if people see who I really am, I'll never be successful because I'm not good enough. And then what I realized was my success would be people seeing exactly who I am, right? Because the failure would be selling something plastic. That would be the failure. Because at the end of the day, that's not me. Everybody's following someone, but it's not actually me. And so I think I learned that when I came out of my abusive relationship. Like, I realized that when I was in my first marriage, that I spent a lot of time living two different lives. Like, my life at home was terrible. I'd learned that as a child. I lived one life at home and and had this facade for my private school and my Catholic school friends. And, you know, I couldn't have all these problems because everybody would be, you know, the family and the name and, the, you know, all of that. And I followed through with that in my first marriage. And so when he left, well, he didn't really leave, he got kind of shoved out. So when he was tossed out, I sat with myself and I went, you know what? I am going to never again have to cover for someone else or lie for someone else or pretend to be something that I'm not. And at the time that I made that promise to myself, I thought it was going to be easy. And that was such a wake-up call to realize that it's really hard to be real. And it's really hard to be yourself in a lot of spaces in society. It's really hard because sometimes being yourself isn't, how can I put it, isn't pretty, right? Because life is messy and chaotic. And people are very unforgiving, I think. You know, and we can talk about that for a whole hour. They're unforgiving of other people's failures, which stems from them being unforgiving of their own failures, right?
So a big mistake that many of us make, especially those who've been victims or survivors of some form of abuse, the biggest mistake is the silence around it, by not admitting, by not saying that this is what happened to me, because we do know that when you speak about it and you seek help and support, that's the beginning of your healing journey.
Absolutely. And I think the thing is that a lot of the times, so one of the things they teach you if you're a public speaker, right, is that you need to look a certain way, and you need to present yourself a certain way, and you need to be perfect for people to listen to you. And I challenge that so much, because I don't think that you are actually influencing people when you are coming from a space of mask, that you actually need to be real, right? And so here's an interesting thing that I wanted to touch on was my whole life I failed at looking like I look today. Right, I failed at it. I was overweight most of my life. I limped, so I was very self-conscious. I had, you know, like I have a couple of disorders, so I was very concerned about that. And while I was doing that, I had this belief that I would always look the way that I looked, and I would always fail at trying to be healthy, right? Because I had a lot of excuses for it too, hey? So one was I hid underneath my weight because it was safer. Like I didn't want to be attractive to other people because then I'd be a target, which is actually just an excuse, right, for not living healthily. And then what happened? I had resigned myself to, I'm going to be this unhealthy, unattractive, because I felt unattractive, okay, overweight, unhealthy person who's battling to walk, and, you know, shame poor me. I had resigned myself to that. And then I was pre-diabetic, and I was so afraid of that insulin. Hey, I don't want to use insulin, like inject all the time, test your blood. Actually, the testing the blood, you know, the pricking the finger is more scary to me than the needle, like really. And so my brother convinced me to try this diet. And because I was afraid of the insulin, I was like, I'm just going to do this. And I'm the most surprised that I did it, right? And I'm really proud of myself that I've stuck to that diet, and now I can cheat a bit more often. But I lost all this weight because I wasn't trying to lose it. Because I wasn't focused on the fact that I can't diet. Because I hadn't learned the lesson of that diet didn't work for you. Okay, let's try something else. Because I was focused in a different way, and I wasn't actually trying to lose weight. I was just trying to not fall asleep at 1 o'clock every day. I started to succeed, but it was hard, right? Because I had to face a lot of other things other than watching people eat baked potato. I also had to face the fact that I have an eating disorder, right? I really do. I'm a comfort eater, and I will down 10 potatoes if I'm upset. And I didn't learn that until I approached the problem from a different perspective. And so I think failure is also about that, is when you fail, look at all the different perspectives before you give up. Because maybe it's something that you're not thinking about that has caused you to fail.
So it's
Maybe
not
you
about
sabotaging.
fixing. So it's not so much about fixing the failure. It's about forging a new path forward, finding a new opportunity.
Yeah, that didn't work. Okay, let me try something else. Like that didn't work. So let me try doing that again and again and again and again. Like that didn't work. Let me try doing this, getting the result I'm aiming for, but approaching it from a different angle. So I don't think, like for me, there's been a lot of, over the years, Lois, I can't even tell you how many times I've thought about closing my organization, and just going like, right? And what I've learned is that every small failure that we've had has taught us something. And so now we're in a much stronger position because we're not focusing on things that we shouldn't be focused on. And one of the biggest failures that we had was rising to the occasion. So when people would attack us, we would rise to that instead of carrying on our path. And so it would move us, right? So people would go, yeah, we can't see how you're helping people. And then we would go into doing all sorts of things that are visible instead of helping people behind the scenes, which is what we actually do. So we try to be more visible, but then there isn't enough time for the behind the scenes and the survivors are getting let down. So now we keep our focus and we add in little things on the side that we can, but our focus stays the same. And I think that's a more successful path, because at the end of the day, it's not about what the general public see, it's about what each survivor gets. So for every survivor that's living a productive, healthy life, that is on a healing journey, because I don't believe in healed, as you know, that is learning and growing, for every one of those that we have, we consider that success. What the general public think about our organization is a concern, but it's not as much of a concern as that each survivor is getting what they need.
Wow, that is fantastic. Focus on your own path. Don't deviate. Sure, consider other people's views, but stick to your knitting.
No, the thing is, other people's views are important, but they shouldn't be overridingly important. And that's as a human being and as an organization or whatever. I cannot control what other people think about me, but I can control how I am living, right? I can't control. So when somebody comes to me and says, Celeste, I find you very intimidating, then I can go, okay, why is that? And I can say to myself, well, am I being intimidating? Am I being too loud? And am I overtaking, and am I overriding people? And then where I can see, because I have a terrible interrupting problem and I know it, and it's getting so much better over the years because I'm aware of it, right? Like I go, oops, I interrupted, and then I shut up. Okay. And so then I learn from that failure. But sometimes people find you intimidating because you are challenging them. And then you need to say, well, is it about me or is it about you? It's not always a reflection, right? It's not always that. But you've got to have balance in your life. So you have to take criticism and look at it and go, is this true? Be careful of just accepting that it's true without asking the question, is it true?
So
and take advice from people who
failure is, sorry?
Take advice from people that you admire and who inspire you, not people that you don't like.
So failure is accepting criticism from the wrong people.
I think so. And I think that's been a big thing for me. I think that I took a lot of really bad advice from people whose best interests weren't me. whose best interests were themselves. And I never questioned the advice. Now I'm much more kind of, let me think about what you say before I just jump in there and, you know, and accept what you're saying to be true. And I think that's what a lot of us do. So someone will say something, and it's funny, right? If somebody says something to you that hurts you so badly, and you don't question it, you just accept that what they're saying is true, it's usually when that person is wrong, right? It's such a funny thing. And then you start having all these failures based on somebody just being nasty to you because they've got an issue with you or whatever. And nobody, that's another thing. Please don't expect everybody to like you. Like, you're not everybody's flavor, right? So people need different flavors. I know that I'm not everybody's shot of tequila, that's for sure.
You can't be. I was watching a commencement speech by Will Ferrell, and he was saying exactly that. He was saying, people are going to find me annoying and people are not going to like my humor. And I thought, you're right, I don't. So
That's good. That's a good one.
so definitely it's
I
about
love that.
accepting feedback and listening to people who you value and who you respect.
And
So
balance.
you've given us a
Balance.
lot of steps on your staircase. Any other steps on your staircase to success?
I think balance is such an important thing, right? I think that it's so hard to achieve, but I think balance is so important. So especially people on social media, you need to understand a meme is a meme. It's a quote. A quote needs to be taken into context. You can't take, like, let's say for instance the quote that you had at the beginning of the session, which I thought was amazing, but you can't apply it to everything because context is important. So when you're reading quotes and you're reading about failure or narcissism or anxiety or whatever, remember to give it context. Because if you take something and you just take a kernel of truth and use it like everywhere, it's not going to work because life is a little bit more complicated than that. But then also remember the solutions to most problems are simple. And we like to complicate things because we need to validate our pain.
Do you want to expand on complicating things such as anxiety and other disorders?
Yeah. Yeah, like, look, you know, anxiety is a natural part of life. There's levels of it, right? But everybody has it. And the simple truth is the answer to anxiety is to ground yourself. That's the simple truth. And it's both a psychological and a physiological thing, right? If you ground yourself, your brain will switch back on and you'll be okay. The problem is if you tell people that just do some square breathing, just breathe, and your anxiety levels will drop, it's too easy, right? Because your anxiety is this big and my solution is this big. And you're going, but it's got to be more complicated than that because it feels so big. Here's the truth of it. The truth of it is the answer to most things is simple like that. It's the problem is getting your brain to accept that there's a simple solution to your huge problem. And then what we do.
Why do we complicate things?
I think we complicate things because it validates it, right? So if I say to you, oh, I've got a little bit of stress here, Lois, I'm feeling a bit stressed out. My problem sounds this big. But if I say to you, you know what, Lois, hey, I'm having a PTSD trigger. I have intense anxiety and I'm completely overwhelmed and I'm triggered. Now, all of a sudden, my problem looks as big as it feels. But now I've labeled myself with all these psychological disorders. And what I really need to do was take a deep breath, like your mother told you to when you were a child, having a temper tantrum. Right? So this is the problem. And because our problems are big, we want big, complicated solutions. Also, there's the added thing of, you know, if you can design an academic field around anxiety, you can put PhD behind it, and then you can charge a lot of money to teach people how to breathe.
I love that. The first speaker we had on this series, Tim Wagner, no relation, he is a breath expert, and he was speaking exactly about that, about breathing to overcome anxiety.
It's such a simple thing that people don't understand it. And the other thing I'll say is that sometimes we fail at techniques or skills because we don't practice them when we don't need them. So if you think about when you learned how to read and write, you were practicing all the time, but you didn't really need to read, right? Your parent could read for you. But if you practice reading all the time, then all of a sudden reading becomes like second nature. And so funnily enough, I had a coffee chat this morning, and one of the ladies said, you know, Celeste, when you talk about grounding now, I don't actually even think about it. I just do it. And I went, yes, because when you didn't need it, you practiced it. You started learning it in crisis, but then you practiced it when you didn't need it. And so when you needed it, the skill was there. And so I think a lot of the time people want these complicated things, and we live in a world where everybody wants a pill.
But that practice when you don't need it is something I believe in with forgiveness. That if you practice forgiveness every day, when it comes to the big one, the unforgivable sin, it's so much easier because you've practiced it and it's become part of who you are.
Yeah, I think the thing is that that people misunderstand us when we talk about forgiveness, like we've spoken about before. And I think also people misunderstand the value of life skills that are simple life skills: breathing, journaling, writing your thoughts down, courageous conversation, questioning. Questioning is such a thing that people don't do. And that's what you need when you fail, right? In order to succeed, you need to go, how did I fail? Why did I fail? What was my attitude? What was my perception? What did I do wrong? Questioning. People don't question enough. They just believe stuff, right? So, I mean, it has a placebo effect, right? If I tell you go and drink honey and ginger every morning and you won't have an anxiety attack, and you really believe me, it'll work.
But you touched on something really interesting there, where you said when you're having a failure, when you're experiencing failure, what are your feelings? What is your attitude? And that is something that we tend, I made a mistake. I did something wrong. It happened. And we're not examining what that is doing to us emotionally.
Yes. Yes. And even like people go, I can't sleep and my dreams are like this. And, you know, just seeing this makes me anxious. And I go, well, have you questioned why? Why can't you sleep? What happens when you go to sleep? I'm so focused. You know what? I threw my name away at last week's party. Yeah, and who hasn't done that? Okay. Like tomorrow, someone else is going to throw their name away at another party, and everybody will have forgot that you threw your name away, because your character is more important than your failure, right? Your character is more important than your reputation. You are not the sum total of your mistakes. All of those things. And we can tell people that, but I think the thing is, that's one of the things about being real, right? When we're out, especially people who've got spaces like we have where we can influence people, and I hate influencer, hey? I don't like that word. But anyway, we've got spaces where we can reach people. We need to set the bar for like real, like going, you know what? I wrote a book and, you know, I can't even sell one copy. Okay, luckily,
Oh, you've frozen.
sold more than one copy. But I mean, and I am
Sorry,
selling more than one
Celeste,
copy. But
you froze there. Can you just go back to you were
it
talking
can be
about your book
disappointing,
and then you
especially when you put a
froze.
book out there. You buff and you go, am I back? I was saying about a book. Oh my gosh, my signal. Welcome to South Africa. Am I back? Am I back, Lois?
Yes, you are.
I don't know.
Yes.
So you write a book and you put all your heart and your soul and your effort into it, and there's like all these details in the cover and everything, and then you can't sell it. And so you feel like a failure. So I don't know how your book sales are going. Mine are okay. They're not anything to write home about. But here's the thing. What about the people who did buy the book? What about the people who did learn from it? What about that one person who can't stop talking about it? I think that we have to look at success differently. Merely the fact that you wrote it and published it is already a success. And then we're going, how do we measure a success? Right? And then we've got this product. So how can we sell this product better? And how do we learn how to, and we keep trying to sell it and we keep trying to do it, right? Because we're not going to give up, because failing to sell it might just mean that our marketing sucks.
Why do we need to measure success?
I think we need to have a measurement of success for ourselves so that we can celebrate our victories. Right? And I think for me, success is not a thing. It's a lot of things. It's about being a better mother, being a better friend, being a better activist, being a better in all different areas of my life. And sometimes I'm successful in some areas and not in other areas, right? And then I have to balance out and do that. But we need to have goals so that we can aim to be better versions of ourselves. And when we reach one, we can celebrate our victories. Because most of us bemoan our failures and don't celebrate our victories. And that's a problem in itself. Because when we fail, all we can see is all our failures. So, if you look back on your staircase, if you're climbing your staircase, right, and you look back, your staircase is made up of failure, 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 success, failure, failure, success, failure. You understand what I'm saying? So when you look back, you need to be able to see your successes as well. When you're looking back down the spiral haunted house staircase, those successes need to be gold steps in between all the junk. And I think that's something we don't teach people as well, is celebrate your successes, even if your failures are big. And sometimes the success is just getting out of bed. Sometimes that's what it is.
That's what I've been reading a lot lately. If you feel you can't shower, at least wash your hands. If you feel, just do something small to start that climb up that staircase.
I'll give you one tiny tip, right? So we do a thing called a celebration. You can do it in a journal or a star chart, or I've got like a tree of life that I stick stuff on, okay? But what you do is you create a physical remembrance of your victories, no matter how big or small. So it could be like you've got this whole, I don't know, a starry night painting, and every time you get out of bed, because bedding out of bed was hard, you stick a star on it, so that you can have a visual representation of the fact that you do have successes. Because in our minds, which are wired for negativity, seeing our failures is easy. Right? Because they're big.
I love
and
that.
Our success.
So create a visual representation showing your climb up that staircase, showing all the achievements and celebrating them when they happen. Very, very good tip. Do you have any other tips for people who are facing failure?
Yeah, you know what? It's absolutely important to remember that all the great inventions in the world and all the great things in the world have come off people bouncing off failure, right? And because you failed at something doesn't mean you are a failure, right? So you have to find inside of you that thing that goes, yes, I failed at that, but I am not a failure. Right? We tend to be all-encompassing, right? Don't do that. Remember your successes, I think, is the biggest tip that I can give. And only kind of integrate and take advice from people who you feel you have respect for, admiration for, and who are doing a good job at whatever it is that you're doing. Like, a lot of people take advice from other people who are in the same situation as them. So it doesn't help if you're all failing and you're taking advice from each other on how to fail. right? When you're failing, look at where the successes are coming from and what other people are doing, and then question it and make it your own. Don't try to be somebody else, just be you.
Just be you. Can you share one of the successes that you had from failure?
I think the greatest success of my life, right, has been the fact that I stopped pretending that everything was okay and that I was okay. I think that the day that I walked out on my, out of my home as a young adult, and I walked into a psychologist's office and I went, I am not okay. And everything is not okay. And everybody thinks that I am because I'm really good at putting on masks. I think when I learned how to take the masks off and just be myself, that is the greatest success. It isn't the easiest thing, but the greatest success is living a real life and just being who you are. And it can be hard, Lois. It can be hard, especially in certain spaces, work environments, church environments in particular, on YouTube and the various different social medias, being real can be very scary. And so I think for me, the success is maintaining my reality of who I am and not just becoming what other people wanted me to become. Because over the years, I've had a lot of that. I've had a lot of people telling me how to dress, how to talk, how to cut my hair, how to do all of these things and how to package myself. So I refuse to package myself. I'm just doing me. And I think that that's good advice. Do you?
And when you're not doing you, you're failing.
Yep. Because even though you might be successful monetarily or you might be successful in other people's eyes, at the end of the day, the person who's looking back at you at the mirror is going, that's not you. And that's what's going to be your failure. Your failure is that living with yourself, if you are going out into the world fake, eventually you're not going to be able to look at yourself in the mirror. And that's the important thing, to be able to look in your own eyes and go, I'm doing okay.
Oh. Any other final tips that you have for people who are facing some form of mistake or failure?
Allow yourself to grieve your loss, I think, is so important. We're very quick in the modern society, right? We're very quick to move on and to not allow ourselves to grieve. When you fail, it's a grieving process, much like when someone passes away or, trauma. All of these things are so interlinked with grief. And I think you need to allow yourself to grieve, and you need to acknowledge your humiliation and your shame, and you acknowledge it. But then please let it go. Let go of all of that, and then look for the lessons, integrate those, and move forward stronger and more resilient. Don't get stuck in that grief and the embarrassment and the shame and the guilt. Don't get stuck there. That's for the moment. That is for learning. But eventually, once you've analyzed it and sorted it out, let it go. Because you know what? There isn't space for new things if we're holding on to old things.
I agree totally. That's what I call the victim status. When you are still holding on to those emotions, you are a victim. And so it's important that you acknowledge those emotions, that you deal with those emotions, as you said, analyze them, learn, because they're all there for a reason. Your anger, your hatred, your shame, it's there to teach you a lesson or to give you some insights. So it's important that you sit with it for a little while, deal with it, and then move on to become that survivor.
And it's interesting that you say that, because I have this theory, right? So we get broken, but we survive, right? We're survivors. I'm not there where I was. So whatever happened to you, however big it was, you're still breathing, you're here, right? My theory is that when we stay in that victimized mentality that you're talking about now, right? When we stay there, we finish the job that somebody else started. We finish the job for them because we become our own abuser. We take over. So where this person was abusive towards us, we now have become abusive towards ourselves. And we are finishing their job. So if you are like me and you like to win, don't become your own abuser. It was a hard lesson for me as well.
That's an excellent insight. It really is, that you actually then are just sustaining all that negativity.
Yeah, you're sustaining the pain and the fear and the anger and all of that. And so the longer you sit there, you need to sit there long enough to process it. And you need to learn that processing is a thing. It's not thinking about it once and then letting it go. Processing needs a bit of analysis, questioning. You need to process. So you process it and you get to a point where you integrate the good and let go of the bad, right? But if you sit stuck wallowing in your pain and your shame and your brokenness, then you actually just took over. You help that person win, right? Because they tried to break you and now you are doing the finishing off. And they've moved on. That's the worst part. They've moved on to someone else or something else. They're hurting someone else, and you are finishing the work that they started. And every time they see you breaking, they get more of your power. It's like a power balance.
I always tell the story. So you're driving and somebody cuts you off, and you're swearing and you're shouting and you're screaming and cursing this person, and this person is on his way, happily driving. He doesn't even know that he upset you, and he's happy, and you carrying all this angst and all this anger and all this high blood pressure. You carrying it with you for the next half an hour.
I mean, my point is, like, what are you spending your time on? I think that's really important. What are you focusing on? So if you're in the middle of your failure and everything's falling apart, you need to find that spark of hope and head towards it, right? Because the more you focus on your failure, the more your failure is going to grow.
Now, how do you find that spark of hope?
I think it's really, it's really a journey to understanding, because we say it a lot. But I think we need to really understand that you were born worthy and enough. And if you really have an understanding of that, then I think you'll always be able to find that spark inside of you. Because it's the innate principle of you are not less or more than anyone else. And so that light is there. And you have to fan it when you're failing, and then you have to like subdue it when you're succeeding. Because I think one of the scary things is a lot of people who start tasting success end up failures because their success takes over and they forget where they came from. So I think it's a balancing act. But every single person has this flame inside of them. You just need to find it. And building resilience helps with that. So the more you overcome your failures, the more you start standing up every time after a failure, the more you'll be able to fan that flame easier. I also think that I'm like lucky because I grew up in an environment where my very formative years, so say before I was 11, I grew up with this in a family where there was always laughter, even when things were bad. And we were always told, at that young age, you can do anything you put your mind to. You know what I'm saying? And so those seeds that were planted in my formative years have been the seeds that have been able me to fan that, like I'm enough. Because in the first 7 years of my life, I was told that. But a lot of people that are out there now have probably never been told that they're enough. And they need to teach themselves that they are enough. It's hard.
How can we help the masses out there to teach them that they are enough?
I think it's all to do with connected humanity and judgment and safe space. And I think as people with the kind of followings that we have, and let me explain, like even if you've got 100 people following you or 10 people following you, you have a responsibility to be a safe space and to teach people that who they are is not necessarily just what they do. You know, like we talk about telling children, I love you, I don't like your behavior. It's that principle. And I think that the more of us that are seeing people that way and are reaching out in connection and being safe spaces, the more we'll create that. But like everything else, we live in a plastic, me first, selfish, world. And the only way to counteract that is one person at a time. There isn't a quick way to turn over. And we can talk about so many things: generational trauma, generational, this idea that in order to rise, we have to be violent and stand on other people and stuff like that. These are all concepts that the world has. And it's sad that after so many years of living and so much history of how violence doesn't work, we live in this violent world. And I don't mean just physically violence.
Celeste, you and I can talk for another 3 hours, but we've been going for an hour. So I think we'll have to schedule another chat sometime in the near future.
I would love to.
Celeste, how can people contact you?
Okay, so I'm on social media. So on Facebook, I am the only Celeste Louw, which helps. You can find us you can find me through Optimystic Bikers Against Abuse. The quickest way to get all our social media links and numbers and everything is just to go to www.optimystic, spelled optimystic.za.net. So if you find or you can search Optimystic Bikers Against Abuse on Google and go to our webpage, which will lead you to everything else. And I think that's the quickest, easiest way to find us. But you can find me on TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, all over the show. It's actually not very difficult to find us if you know where you're looking.
Well, I will put that in the description below with the correct spelling, because it is it is an unusual way to spell optimistic.
It was an unusual choice, but I think it works for us.
It certainly has worked for you, so well done on that. And everyone, you're welcome to contact me for a free 30-minute chat on the first steps up that staircase that you can take to find your feet after failure. Or if you would like to share your failure story on this series, you can also book a call there. The information is in the description below. Celeste, I have to say thank you so much once again for sharing your wisdom, your insights, your authenticity. You are always fascinating to listen to.
Thank you so much, Lois, and thank you for having me, and good luck. People, don't be scared to share your stories. Failure is the staircase to success.
Absolutely. So guys, please subscribe to my channel and please click on the various links above so that I can get more views, so we can help more people find their feet after failure. Thank you very much.